next time, feel free to throw something at me if I'm misunderstanding, just to get my attention the hard way.
Well, that was, that was my fault in maybe jumping in.
Jason, did you meet Brent? Okay.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. All right, let's see. Yeah, you threw me off there. Thought we were all done the way you came up here.
In your dreams.
All right, we're going to item 7. This is the Island View Park project. Some more information since our meeting last Wednesday that Steve wants to pass by us.
Yeah, this is significant information. I will tell you that over the last week, I have had this recurring thought that we, in order to do our due diligence, we shouldn't just run with a proposal received from Zion's Bank regarding a real property lease option. And so I talked on the phone actually for an hour yesterday, Jake and me and Lisa, with Jason. Just fortuitous that you're still here, Jason, tonight, because I felt we needed to get an independent source, independent advice as to whether there were other options and whether the option we had been presented with could even be more competitive if we went down that road. And Jason advised us that you can issue revenue bonds for a 7-year period, that the cost of, and you could secure them with the RAP taxes, not have to pledge property, but you pledge the RAP taxes. They're
Just a portion of the RAP taxes.
Portion of the RAP tax, right? That the issuance fees are greater than they are for the property lease approach, but the savings, the reduction in interest rate is more than enough to offset that additional cost. And so Jason's projecting that we might get something in the 2.3 range on interest rather than 2.83%.
It's a pretty big difference in coupon rate.
Yeah, and that the difference in the cost for the two approaches, if you had a 2.73 versus a 2.83 rate, you'd make up that difference in issuance cost. And so if in fact we can get a 2.3 or something in that neighborhood, then that would be a better deal for us. Jason is putting together a comparison of those two approaches, and I think by maybe Thursday you're going to have something for us. Jason's work, his team's work, would be embodied in the cost of issuance, be part of you're thinking it's in the neighborhood of $20,000, total cost, bond counsel, and year fees and so forth. Opposed to, contrasted with the $12,000 that you remember for the other approach. So I'm recommending to you, and the other concern about the bonding approach that I expressed to you was I'm afraid it was going to take too long. But he has told us that if we have a parameters resolution in a brief, short, special meeting next week, that we could then start the clock and have a closing on this, final action on this by the council on the first meeting in May, which would be in time before a bid is awarded for the Island View work. Now, let me hand out this sobering page. We'll go this way with...
This different from the package?
This was attached, so yeah, but I'm handing you hard copies in case you want a hard copy to mark on.
With.
For you and Jamie, and give one out there to Jason, and if you have one, when you get done down there, give it to Brant, okay? Oh, here, Jake, give this one to, okay. So this is an update of cash flow you've seen before. It's based on some assumptions. We took out all the park impact fees. That was one of the things you told me to do, right?
Right.
So that's not in there. And it's based on the assumption that, and this first page, it's two-sided, right? Did I give you? Yep. So we're on the cash flow side, and this is just dealing with this year, with the idea that if we were going to pay for phase one under the full scope that you, I think a majority of you at least expressed a desire to go back to when we met last week. So we got the full scope in here. We got the probable cost estimate yesterday or today. Was it today, this morning? I can't remember, yesterday or today. And that's been put in down here, that $1,543,000. And then 61,000 of it is for the lighting alternative, leaving out of bidding the light fixtures and the wiring as an alternate, including the bases and the conduit as part of the basic bid, but the lighting fixtures and the wiring would be an alternate. So if in fact you took that out, you put it as an alternate and ultimately took it out, then the estimate is that you would be $487,000 short of your revenue that's projected for this year, assuming no park impact fees. This is based on 85% of the RAP distribution and also the 5% for the last half of this calendar year, the 5% contingency. I'll pause a minute and see if you want to ask questions about anything on this page before we go to the backside.
Doesn't that pretty much line up with what we roughly talked about the other night? Because this is the $500,000, and then if we added in another $1 million approximately for phase two, then that's the the reason we need to borrow the 1.6.
In that ballpark, yeah.
Yeah.
With the understanding that
roughly.
you could flex on the second phase and take out something,
Yeah.
it would be easy to leave something out in phase two.
But there's nothing drastically different here than that rough math that we were doing.
Right, other than I took out all the impact fees.
Right. But we're not borrowing
Right.
1.6.
Yes,
So
if
which
you
is-
do
which
a
is-
second phase, along with making up this difference on the first phase, then you're borrowing somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.5 million.
Right.
And
Which
so-
is the good news is that you took out the impact fees. So when those come in, that's
Right.
additional, yeah.
Right. Those would be applied to the payments to the rec district because that's related to the community park expansion for which you can use the impact fees.
Right.
So now, before you turn to the backside and have a heart attack, let me point out a number here that's going to be carried to the backside. In the middle of these numbers, you see 181,228. That's 85% of the estimated RAP tax distribution for July through December of this calendar year. That's based on a $414,000 estimate for the current fiscal year of RAP tax, and we're on target to hit that, times a 3% increase, times half a year, 6 months, times 85% of that. Gives you the 181,228. Now, that number is carried over to the backside. This is where I'm projecting what will you have available in RAP taxes through the remaining years of that RAP tax authorization. What will be available for debt service under the conservative assumptions you gave me. Again, no park impact fees assumed over that whole 6-7 year period, which is not realistic, but if you want to be conservative, that's what we're doing here. It's also assuming a 15% reduction due to a recession. So the first line there that says calendar year 2020, January through June, the 181,228 from the reverse side is reduced using a 0.85 factor, which just happens to be the same as the 85%, but this is a recession factor of assuming a 15% reduction. 154,000. then less the payment to the rec district, this payment number 2. Payment number 1's on the other side. So you'll have available for new debt service at June 30 next year only $42,000. Then the next year, which we can now go to a fiscal year basis, and I'm assuming that once you get the impact of the recession, you can start building up against a 3% increase. Who knows how long it would take to start kicking it back in. So you can see how I get the $317,000. But 154 times 2, that means so you get, because the 154 was half a year, so times 2 makes it for a whole year. Times a 3% growth after you hit bottom, start coming back. Less the third payment to the rec district. And then the next fiscal year, you follow the pattern I'm using here. And so there's your numbers, and Jason was given these numbers yesterday to see what kind of borrowing we could get under a bond approach, under some assumed interest rates. And you probably haven't done enough to tell us how much you could borrow with this kind of
Well, we did run this.
Did you?
Yeah. So based on this cash flow, we did, using just exactly these numbers, so the 42,000, the 208, 220, 233, then 346, 357, and 337. So we did use those figures. We got 2 indicative rates. We got one at 2.6%. and one at 2.44%. Again, just indicative rates based on the RAP tax. So with that and this cash flow, it gives us just a little over 1.5 million. Doesn't give us 1.6 though. It's just a little over 1.5 million. So anyway, that's kind of where we're at right now. When you mentioned before, we have approached this 2 ways. One is similar to the Zion's approach, which is a true lease, a real property lease. And we know that there are other providers of the same type of product. So we were looking at that to determine whether or not, KeyBank, Wells Fargo, Washington Federal, or a number of other institutions would provide it just on a real property lease basis. And then we're getting indicative pricing on the RAP tax as being a pledge. And so we're gathering that information so that we can present that and provide it. And really our intent is if there's a bidder transaction to find or determine, we'll get that through the due diligence and through, determining whether or not there's a provider out there. And I'm not suggesting that we're dismissing the opportunity for the real property lease, or that the Zions Bank might provide a very good option. It's just that we know there are other providers of that same product. And the bond side of it, although it might take 2 or 3 weeks more, the fact that you can pledge RAP tax as opposed to a real property lease really widens the number of people that would be interested in purchasing the bonds or the debt from the city. So as I mentioned, you're a AA credit. What I had mentioned to Steve is your sales tax, you have outstanding sales tax bonds that are AA rated. Well, the current public market for AA rated is closer to 2.3 or 2.2%. But I would expect a private placement would carry a little bit of premium. So we were thinking 230, 240, 250, and that's where some of the indicative pricing have come in. So we're hoping to have that due diligence wrapped up by Thursday, so you can see what that would look like, and then we would look for direction if you wanted us to go out and actually solicit, firm bids on any or all of those, with the idea that if you did a parameters resolution, we could close within basically 30 or 35 days after that date. And so we had programmed that first week in May that you could easily close on it if you were able to, do a parameters resolution the first week in April.
Well, even next.
Well, if you do it next, then we could even accelerate it.
If you wait till the first week in April, well, the first week in May would be 5 weeks later, wouldn't it? The first council meeting in May would be 5 weeks after the first council meeting in April.
The requirement for bonds is you have to have 30 days
Or before
public
4 weeks.
notice once you've provided a notice of intent, which happens after a parameters resolution. So if parameters resolution happened one day, it got noticed in the paper on the Utah Public website. Within 2 or 3 days, you have 30 days from that. So we always say, well, plan on 35 days from the day you adopt the parameters resolution before you could officially close. But
So does that allow, if we're looking at the first meeting in May, which is what, May 7th? Is that a Tuesday?
Oh, I think it's earlier.
yeah, the parameters would be different of what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a parameters resolution now to start the 30 days.
Right,
And then your first meeting in May, you'd do the final bond resolution and you'd close right after that.
right, that's what I understood. But so I'm just working backwards. If May 7th is the council meeting, can they do a parameters resolution on their first meeting in April, which is April 4th, right? Second, April 2nd.
As long as you can get it in the
That's-
newspaper,
that's-
as long as you can get it in the newspaper before the 30 days, or
We-
within 30 days.
Well,
Well, we'd have to give it to them for
we-
the next week.
I think to be safe, you might want to have a special meeting with the just for the parameters resolution, if you're wanting to go forward with this next Tuesday, 6 o'clock or 6:30 or whatever works for you.
So I have a dumb question, especially sitting here with all these CPAs, but we've been over-conservative on these numbers. If we weren't as conservative, would our rates be better?
Probably, but what we would be pledging as the security, it's technical, so I don't want to, maybe get overly technical other than to say that these would be senior bonds. So the South Davis Rec District payment is an obligation, clearly an obligation. But in the context of the bondholder would receive a first lien pledge of your entire pool, in essence. So really the 350, maybe the 414, whatever that revenue is, technically their threshold. But we're only going to size it according to these numbers. So from their perspective, they've got a debt service coverage of way more than
one-to-one.
So it
1-to-1.
probably wouldn't lower our interest rate.
I don't think it's going to be significantly more, even if we were more optimistic even in the projections, because we're ultimately just sizing it to
Well, aren't
this.
these really just for our sake? I mean, as a council, we just wanted to be ultra
Right, but-
conservative.
Yeah, this is a
He's-
worst case
Now he's
scenario.
working with these.
I
He's
don't think,
using
is
these.
this what you'd be submitting, though?
Yes.
No, I think it's a good question to just, I think what we would share with them is, your first receipt of these were last year, right? Or is this your first?
You mean of the?
Wrap tax, excuse me.
No, it was 2016, June was the first distribution, so
been a
3
couple of
years
years.
ago,
Yeah.
this June.
So what they're really going to look at is the previous 2 or 3 years of historical collection.
Yeah, these were for ours.
They'll do their own discounts for recession, for economic downturn, et cetera, but they're going to look back more at this 414,000, and then they'll kind of adjust it accordingly. So I'm not concerned. We're going to tell them that we only need the 1.5 million, and this is how we need to structure the payment stream, but they'll have way more coverage than one-to-one. So I think by virtue of that, they'll view the credit as very good.
Okay.
One of the concerns with the real property lease, and I think Zion's Bank even mentioned this, is it's really akin to a deed of trust, a mortgage interest. So they're taking a deed of trust on Park that really they never intend to foreclose on. They're really basing this on a moral obligation that the city's going to make the payments on an annual appropriation, because the tool, the mechanism they use with the real property lease is annually you're going to appropriate enough to make the lease payment, but you're not bound to make it over a fiscal year. Whereas the wrap tax, you're actually committing on an annual basis. So the credit is actually better with the wrap tax. We'll find more purchasers with that, because a lot of purchasers we've even talked to so far said, if it's real property and it's non-essential, we view Park non-essential, We don't want to take that security because we're not going to foreclose on a park. So, but there are other providers for the real property lease. So we're going to find that out, determine what those rates look like, and then we'll look at the RAP tax and see what those rates. But we are expecting that the credit of the RAP tax will significantly, we think, lower the interest rate.
We're glad to have you in our back pocket. You're a good tool.
Well, happy to help.
So the question then is, do we meet next week? I guess the first question is, are you still supportive of borrowing money to do the full scope of phase one as you have desired and to proceed with phase two?
I find it very serendipitous that being as extremely conservative as possible, we still come up with the same number we were talking about. So I feel very comfortable.
I would like to, I am willing to support it. I would like to look at one of the issues that I mentioned to you about potentially doing as part of that funding through some internal
Some transfers between
transfers
funds.
between funds and potentially loans between funds and potentially reducing the $1.5 million sum. I would like to personally not be quite as complete. I'd like to see us even a little more conservative than we are in what we've committed.
The only thing
So
that
borrowing from ourselves.
The only thing that I would say in response to that is, if the principle that we have bought into is that waiting on the parks projects that are provided by the RAP tax funds is more costly than borrowing the money, then I say we borrow as much money right now as we can feel comfortable, because we're going to finish this master plan project. We're going to know what we want to spend the RAP tax money on. We spend the money at this low interest rate. And then this was our maximum of what we feel comfortable borrowing because of how ultra conservative we wanted to be in our projections of revenue to be able to pay back the debt. But there will still be other park projects that will be backed in essence by the RAP tax. And so if we felt like it was going to save us more to do some of those other projects as well, then we could talk about transferring funds rather than borrowing more money.
Well, here's an interesting thought is if we transfer from one fund, if we use money of our own funds, we're taking it out of the treasurer's pool, the public PTIF, which is currently earning last month 2.97%. And so if we borrow money at 2.4% or 2.5%, we're actually getting a pretty good deal.
Yeah, you're making money. In effect, you're saying you're making money on the arbitrage.
Yeah.
Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, we come from a community that generally is averse to doing the borrowing. And if we can do something to skinny the amount down a little bit that's borrowed, the people that I've talked about would prefer that approach. The other thing in contemplation of the additional projects, I really believe that we're not going to go 5 years with no additional park impact fees.
I agree.
Exactly.
And so there's other money coming in there to help us do the other things. I just, I'm not saying I won't vote for $1.6 million or $1.5 million, excuse me. I'm saying I would prefer to see it a little skinnier and do some bootstrapping. Not reducing the project, but doing some of it with bootstrapping.
I think my only counter to that, Bill, would be is at what point do we, even with internal borrowing, do our admin costs that we're loading against these bonds, become ineffective? I mean, if we're talking 20,000 versus 12, and we've already jumped 8, and so I guess I don't know where that threshold would be, but I agree with you. The borrowing issue is a problem. What we're also saying here is once we do this, we have definitely said, for now and until the end of these bonds, we have committed 85% of that
Yeah.
RAP tax towards these
Well,
parks.
we really, we've committed 85% of the reduced number, but we really
Agreed.
haven't. And if you take 20,000 over $1.5 million, I haven't done the math, but that works out to be about 0.013. And if you take it over $1.2 million, it's 0.015.
That's why you're the CPA, so.
It's not that
So
significant.
the admin
differential.
fees don't move it for you one way or another.
Pardon?
The admin loading doesn't really bother you one way or another.
Well,
No, the ability to go back and tell people, yeah, we looked at skinnying it down. I mean, that's one
Sure.
of the things that we were told when we did the property tax increase a year ago. Can't you skinny this down a little bit? Do we have to do all of this? I want to do all the park, but if I can do $300,000 internally, I think that's preferable.
Well, and I don't know if this helps you feel better, because I know you hear from certain voices more than others, right?
Correct.
But we did have extremely good turnout on our master's plan survey, which included a question about would you want us to bond with the RAP tax money? And the majority that had a yes or no opinion answered yes. And then quite a few answered don't know either way right now, but I'm imagining that if you gave them the information that we're talking about, the costs of waiting, the low percentage rate, that it's lower than what we're getting and saving our money right now, et cetera, that 100 plus that didn't know could easily bump those that were a yes vote on that versus a no vote on that. You're looking at a possibly 2/3 to 3/4 ratio of yes.
But we don't know that.
Fair comment.
What we do know is that 47% said don't bond, and
47?
47% of the, yes,
Out of
47% of
those
those
who
who
said
had
yes
an
or
opinion
no.
Oh,
on
of
that
those that
question.
expressed an opinion.
It was a 53 to 47,
Yeah.
and then there was the I don't
Then there were
know.
the I don't knows.
It's into the range of where policymakers need to make a decision.
Right.
I mean, that percentage, I'd
Definitely,
say that's
yeah.
definitely a policymaker, either way.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I have heard from several people since then, because I've been asking, how do you feel? Did you take the survey? And I had a lot of people say, I never saw the survey. I didn't realize that that's what was going on. I said, well, we did our best to send it to you, and you could take it online, or you could do the paper copy. But the question that keeps coming back is, this is a community that traditionally we dig in, we bring out our shovels, and we help. Why aren't you giving us an opportunity to reduce the cost with our sweat equity? And that's not the city employees. They want to know, why aren't you asking us as the citizens? Because we would rather put in some effort, do some service projects, and have more buy-in to the park rather than have it bonded.
I'm sympathetic to that comment, but unfortunately, I'm going to go the other way on that comment. The same thing that is evident in other places within many of the lives in town is that one of the places people used to do sweat equity, which was in their church, not to make this a religious discussion, is no longer available. And it's no longer available because of the administrative and the quality supervision of the projects. Admirable, laudable sentiment.
But is
Unfortunately,
demo,
in today's world, it just doesn't work. You got liability issues with somebody getting hurt. It just doesn't work. I hear what you're saying. I just don't think it works.
And to be super cynical, that's coming from the same people who said they didn't answer the survey, even though we sent it to them in the mail. So
they're not all the same people.
I know, just to be a little bit.
I wanted to just clarify one point. It might be helpful in the discussion. I think unlike some loans where consumer loans, commercial loans, other loans that we get into, a lot of times there are provisions to pay it off early. And a lot of times there's make-whole provisions, meaning we pay penalties associated with them. Sometimes that's on our mortgages, sometimes on commercial loans. So if it's helpful, I don't know that it would be, but we're structuring this so that these are really prepayable at any time with no payment or prepayment penalty or anything like that. So I mean it to help if the discussion is we're concerned about the interest that you're paying on it. If other revenues come in, like impact fees, like capital project funds that you might have that you could transfer, you could, we believe, pay these down early without any prepayment penalty at any time prior to their maturity. So I think that provision or structure is helpful, not necessarily make a decision between internal lending or external lending, but knowing that you're not locked into a 7-year deal with the interest the whole time. If you have funds that come in higher than you expected and your residents feel, well, you know, let's not pay more interest than we have to, this structure will give us the flexibility of paying that sooner.
I appreciate that perspective, but I'll go with Steve's vote on that one. At that point, we'd be better off. We've already taken the grief of the borrowing.
Yeah.
At that point in time, we're better off with the money in the treasurer's fund, at least in today's circumstance.
Yeah, and right now it's increasing regularly.
But to your point, Bill, about it's 5 years, no impact fees, not, I don't think it's realistic that it's gonna be flat, but I would say, even if you, let's say everything went swimmingly and this hotel group came in, they did their purchase, everything was executed on time, before that property impact fees came in for the right apartments, I think we're 3 years down the road.
Over a 3-year period, probably, yeah.
Yeah, at least, to get to where we would be seeing this park impact fee. So I don't think there's not gonna be a significant needle move between now and 3 years.
But he said no park impact fees.
Right, but.
And we do have other developments. that will
I was
Sure.
going to say, we've got the 33 homes being built over on Page's
But
Lane.
those are over the next 2 years. So what I'm saying is I don't, if we were to look at this from a borrowing standpoint, I would still use these numbers as is and not even look towards augmenting it with park impact fees in any significant quantity until year 3.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying, is from that perspective. That's where I would see you'd see enough of a significant change in revenue to make a difference, at least the way I'm looking at it right now. And you seem to think 3 years is probably realistic, or beyond a 3-year horizon?
Well, yeah, you'd see some sooner than 3 years, but if you're saying how long would it take the 111 units to be built if they could start within the next year?
Assuming we stick to our phasing to where we said the hotel had to be in, I think we said in place.
You said the foundation, you said the foundation.
has to be
Foundation,
in.
yeah.
Started.
Yeah,
So they don't have to have a certificate occupancy,
No,
but
no.
you're still looking at that plus the apartments. Even if they built like one building, I still think you're a couple years down the road for sure.
and then you have the 33 homes on Page's Lane. I expect that's probably 2 years, over 2 years, but they're gonna start building this year. So you are gonna see some, yeah. Yeah,
I'm not against it. I would support, I mean, we've got meetings and things going on next week. It's not gonna be that difficult to
No, not at all.
30 minutes on the front end of something.
on the front end of something.
Steve's thinking if it doesn't involve my retirement, it's just fine.
So we're not gonna make any formal motion or anything on this tonight, other than arranging a meeting?
Yeah, that's what I'm suggesting, is if at least a majority of you are supportive of this. Now, the parameters resolution, correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, has a maximum amount that you would borrow, and it has a maximum interest rate too, with the understanding that it would be something under that most likely. So don't be scared by those kind of numbers that are put in there. So we need to give you direction as to the amounts.
Yeah, that might be helpful, you know, with the parameters resolution. I know that we typically, you know, if 1.5 is kind of your target, we usually put in another couple $100,000, just so we've got enough buffer there. In terms of interest rate, I think that's really driven by, you know, your discussion. You know, it
Well,
seems like 3% is kind of a maximum target. It doesn't sound like you're gonna be over 3%, so it seems like that'd probably be a good maximum coupon rate. The only other thing you said is the maximum number of years, so it seems like you're pretty confined to the RAP tax.
Oh, yeah.
So you
Absolutely.
set 7 years or whatever.
Right.
And then there's a discount from par, which would be another factor, but typically discounts on private placements aren't very appealing. They're not used very much, so it'd probably just be at a par, 100%. So those would be the parameters that we would need to discuss so that we could put it into a document for you to then consider.
I don't understand bumping the interest rate that far. Why would we say 3% instead of 2.7 or
Well, the
2.6?
only reason I say is the way the state law works is that it's a maximum coupon rate. So when you have serial maturities, I don't know why, I don't want to make this complex, but you have, say your first year, you might have an interest rate or a coupon rate on that transaction at, say, 2%. In year 2, it might be 2.3%. In year 4, it might be 2.5%.
You're
In
talking
year
about
6,
because it's the same amount of interest over it.
no, what it does is it's a blended rate on all of the serial bonds. So you might have a purchaser, instead of just giving you a flat 2.3%, they might have the lower term, or excuse me, the shorter term first year they could be below 2%. And the last 7 year
3%.
could be higher than 3%. But in state law, you have to give the maximum coupon, not the net effective rate, which would be the blended rate, but you have to give the maximum. So the reason I say 3 is just in case someone,
So to end up at 2.4, 1 year we might be paying.
yeah, because someone might have a structure where it's 1.9%, but the last year is 3%. That would allow for the maximum coupon to float to potentially that 3%. You know, ultimately, the parameters resolution is only an intent to issue. It doesn't bind. You still would have to come back in your first meeting in May and ratify whatever you're ultimately going to do. So we look at the maximum parameters as more of just a guideline for the public to understand what the intent might look like, but you don't want to squeeze it too much, that then you've got to go back through the process.
So if you were looking at a parameters resolution that said like 1.8 million, 3%, that gives you enough overhead on both?
Yeah, that is if, in case someone needed a reserve fund, which I don't think they would need a debt service reserve fund, but, you know, that would take into account if someone said, well, I want a debt service reserve fund, which is really going to make your last year's payment, but you're borrowing that up front. I don't expect that, but that would give you that extra leeway. I mean, I'm sensitive to your discussion. So to me, I was looking at it more from, say, 1.7 million, 3% maximum coupon par with a 7-year term, because I don't see any way that you'd go beyond the 7. It sounds like there's not much motivation to go over 3% if,
Right.
you know, there's something that can be lower than that. And it really doesn't seem like, based on your cash flow or your plan of what you have in phase 1 remaining and what you'd like to do in phase 2, that you would need more than 1.5 million or 1.6 million. So
I thought that the numbers didn't justify more than 1.5.
they don't. That's what I guess I'm saying in a roundabout way.
So you've got to cap it at 1.5,
Yeah, now again.
unless you change the number.
If the interest rate came down, there's more than 1.5.
Sure,
You
that's
know,
true.
we've done sensitivity where we've gone down to 2.2%, even 2.1%, not saying that we get that, but it does bump it up closer to 1.6 million as opposed to 1.5 million, so,
I think it would easily do that.
yep.
Yeah. Which, if that's the case, I would say that what we'd want to see is what we can borrow based on these conservative numbers for payment. Are we going to talk about a time to meet right now, or I need to excuse myself?
Yes, we
so-
need to agree on that.
Okay, let's do that quickly.
Tuesday night, I presume, 5:30, 6?
Aren't we
just-
already meeting, many of us here Wednesday night anyway?
Yeah,
Oh.
but that's for casual
That's a party.
celebration.
What are
Well,
we
I'm
at
talking
now?
an hour ahead of time.
What's
It
that?
starts at 3 to 6.
Oh, that's right, it's 3 to 6, I'm sorry. Never mind, sorry.
We don't want to make Steve stay
Comment,
after his.
comment withdrawn.
What time?
Well, I'm suggesting early evening so that you can get on with other things, but
Yes.
not too early so you can get here from Salt Lake. What
Were
would
you
that-
saying 6, Steve?
6 o'clock?
Is that what you,
6 o'clock, really short?
Yeah,
Yeah.
uh-huh.
I could even do 5:30 if that helps anyone.
Well, it's up to you guys, what time you want to do it.
Whenever.
I'm pretty available, so.
5:30 is a little bit better for me, but either way is fine.
5:30 it is then.
5:30, okay. Can you get us parameters, resolution sample to follow or whatever?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just has some boilerplates, insert number here. That's, okay.
Really pretty straightforward. It's a short resolution. It would direct, after the meeting is when you direct the paper to publish one-time notice of intent.
Okay.
A couple of other things.
All right.
I'll get it.
Thank you. Hey, Brant, are you glad you signed your contract before you came to one of our meetings?
We
This is a
are.
light night.
We're going to be out of here early tonight.
Come on.
This afternoon.
Don't scare him away.
The last,
I still want to retire.
the last two were really early.
Well, we'll figure that out when you rearrange the nameplates.
And she said he's good for anything we could serve on the commissioner or whatever else. He doesn't fit the.
All right. Number 8, municipal code amendment on the cemetery regulations.
I know. Sorry.
Wow, that's an all-in-one. Motion second and a vote.
Sorry. I'll behave. It is after 11.
That was George on steroids.
Yeah, that's jumping past everything.
At least you want to give it a brief explanation.
Yes, we noticed a conflict in our ordinance with our fee schedule on the cemetery. Right now, you can only buy in immediate need, so we're just proposing some quick amendments to fix that. All in favor?
I had one question. Shame on me, I thought I had read this closer than that. 1D, I thought there was a provision beyond just moving into a nursing home type situation, that if a person moved out of the city and then needed it, so they've died, they were considered a resident for a period of 3 years.
Okay, so you're looking at subsection 1D on the fee schedule. Any person who was formerly domiciled within the corporate limits of Centerville City immediately prior to moving from the city for the purpose of becoming domiciled in any other facility for the purpose of resolving medical or residential care. Okay, immediately.
So any facility, if they move in with family, that's not included, and I thought it was.
Immediately prior to moving from the city for becoming domiciled in any facility. Well, that's interesting. Let's see.
Pretty sure we have not interpreted moving in with a family member as qualifying. Right, Jake?
I think we should.
I think we should too.
Would that be covered with the or residential care?
Well, it
I don't
depends on
know,
how you
I'm
define
asking the question.
facility.
If
Yeah,
you tell
what's
me if it is,
facility?
it's not a facility.
Although under state law, in certain situations, you can get like Medicaid funding for home health care.
Yeah,
as
we
a
may want to,
facility.
we may want to look at the minutes, because I think we maybe had a discussion about this, because the comment was, well, wait a minute, how long can they live with their kids? And maybe they're just
Right.
living with their kids for 20 years, so.
I thought we set it
that's
at
fine.
3 years. I mean, I don't have any problem
Yeah.
with limiting the time.
Well, this, we're not proposing any amendments to this, so,
Yeah, but it caused me to reread it.
yeah, I mean, we could
So-
look at
so
the
is it-
minutes from when we did talk about
Is
that.
it when we can handle the amendments and then come back and address that on another night?
We can.
After next week.
Short timer's attitude.
That started only at 10 o'clock before. So a motion to approve ordinance 2019-05.
We have a motion, we have a second.
Second.
Further discussion? Let's do a roll call vote. Councilman Ince?
Aye.
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 Motion passes 4-0. All right, let's move on to the next one. This is item number 9. This is a municipal code amendment regarding the chief of police. And Lisa, you are going to handle this too, right?
Yes, this is another quick amendment requested by the chief of police. They are seeking formal accreditation of the police department by the Utah Chiefs Association. It's quite a lengthy process, and they're working their way through. And one requirement was that the chief of police has to have full authority and control of the operation and administration of the police department. I ran into a little snag, though, because our state law says that he's actually subject to the appointing body. So I just made reference to Utah State Code that he has all authority except as otherwise provided by state law, because there's a little bit of a limitation there. And he's fine with that. I think that'll work for their program. So we're recommending approval of these quick amendments as well. And I went ahead and updated based on the statute, which added the child protection unit.
I did have a question on that and unfortunately the chief's not here. Is that handled by an existing officer, or are we anticipating more staff for a child protection unit?
Oh, that is just an option. They do not have to create one. It's just in the laundry list. I went to the statute to see if there were any amendments, and that had been added in, but it's not something that we're planning. It's just an option.
Okay.
Any further questions before I entertain a motion?
Motion to approve ordinance 2019-06.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, Councilwoman Meekum.
Aye.
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 Motion passes 4-0. Item number 10, we did not have Marcus come tonight. You have your financials in your packet. The only other thing I would bring up that Steve and I had talked about, whether you want to continue to receive those monthly or whether you want to receive them by email monthly and have presentation quarterly. Or if you'd like the presentation monthly.
I believe that is adequate.
You what?
I believe that is adequate.
Email monthly and presentation quarterly.
I would like that, even though we don't discuss it, that we at least, because there are people who track it, that if we receive the monthly, that we at least post it in the agenda and reference that we've received it.
Yeah.
So that anyone who
That's a good
wants
idea.
to look at the financials can.
What we could
But
do,
We do that regular.
we could put it on Novus under city manager report, and then you have, if you have questions, you can.
Right, we can reference
That's a
it, and
good
that
way.
way anyone in the public who wants to see it on the monthly can, but we don't have to have Marcus out here every month to talk about it.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
Okay, yeah, I'd like that option, that's good. Okay, moving on then, item number 11, Mayor's Report. I'll be really brief. We have the Census Bureau starting up. Who we put in charge of that?
Robin?
Sounds like Robin.
She knows everybody in
You
town.
mean-
Cassie.
Cassie, yeah.
Cassie's in charge of that. However, I got an email from her. I guess he wants her to try and put a committee together. Obviously,
I don't want her to put one together.
Steve says he doesn't care if she puts
No, I
one
don't think
together.
you need that committee.
yeah,
We're
I'll talk
recommending-
with her about it. But obviously, what we're trying to do is get as high a count as possible because it helps us with the funding that we may receive. The fire service report. The biggest thing, not the biggest thing, one thing we discussed there is everybody's pretty concerned about large trucks being on Legacy now. Not much we can do about it, but even the fire chief says the access to Legacy is awful. And so he says we're probably going to have to, on the farther south part of Legacy, have Salt Lake come out. You know,
Really?
if a semi turns over there
This way
and,
to get back on it.
Yeah, but Salt Lake, I mean, their access is 7. Wow, that's
Yeah.
really tough. That's
Why Salt
Yeah.
Lake instead of Bountiful westbound?
that's a good question. I'd ask him, but he just, Salt Lake, you know, Mayor Earnshaw was really distraught about it from Woods Cross. He said he's up there and lobbied so big time against it. Everybody felt it was kind of the legislature coming back and getting back at Rocky Anderson for what he did 10 years ago, but the truckers union lobbied pretty heavy too because of inland port coming in.
I was gonna say it all revolves around the inland port.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
So-
legislators that really want that, so.
A lot of concern. I guess there's potential replacement of the pavement because they have heavier trucks. You know, it wasn't built for that, so.
And they told us it wasn't built for that, and they would never put them on. And then when we questioned them again, they said, oh, it was built for that. I mean, I've sat right there in the transportation committee and been told both ways.
Yeah. So, I would, yeah, one other thing, I was asked by the parents of Charlotte Healy, she was the gal that was hit, the little girl. I went and visited with Mr. Healy on Sunday night, and he just said she's the CAT scan is positive, that the surgery went well on her legs. She just wanted me to pass on to the city just to also think and be concerned for the driver of the vehicle too, because they were having a difficult time. So, but so far so good with the young girl, the 5-year-old, and her progress and recovery.
Has the driver's story been borne out?
The story?
As far as the speed and everything, I think.
As far as
chief
speed
indicated
and
it looks-
the little girl darted out in the street, I mean, has that been validated by the police?
Yes.
Yes.
I haven't been able to ascertain that.
Yes.
Good. I'm glad, I mean, that was one of my hopes.
Yeah, I went and visited with him Sunday night. His wife had not left the hospital yet from when it had happened, but he said, please pass that on, that she's doing well, and we're concerned about the driver. And then 3 appointments tonight: Debbie Dahl to the Whitaker Museum, Shauna Dickamore to Trails and a committee, and Julianne Zollinger to Parks and Rec Committee.
Would you repeat those, Mayor, please?
Debbie Dahl, D-A-H-L, the Whitaker, Shauna Dickamore, the Trails, and Julianne Zollinger to Parks and Rec. So I need a motion if you approve those. Or I tried to send you in advance. I didn't get to everybody in advance, but
I'd make a motion to approve the 3 people outlined for committee responsibilities.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, great. That's my report. So Steve?
Planning Commission business, I apologize. I didn't even look at their last meeting agenda. You can fire me if you'd like. But one of the items I know was the county's subdivision. Was that on the last one, Lisa?
Yes.
So that'll come to you next time, the subdivision plat for the county's 3 lots on 200 South. That may have been the only significant action. Was there something else, Lisa?
Yeah, we had trouble with a quorum, so we had another chapter of the subdivision ordinance and then also the training, and so those were tabled till the next meeting.
So I covered everything then, right?
Right.
Oh, okay. The capital improvement program you have on,
Oh, there was one more, I think there was a CUP in Marketplace for a dog grooming facility.
okay. So attached to Novus is the 3-page capital improvement program for 2019, meaning the calendar year, this calendar year, because those projects will stretch into the next fiscal year. And I have reviewed with Marcus and Jake our funding for the street projects, the drainage projects, the water projects. We have sufficient funding to accomplish the full scope of those projects on each page. But in the case, as you heard me say earlier, if we, depending on what the bids come in on the street projects, we may need to drop one of the overlays off in order to cover the Lund Lane. Now, the reason we can we have enough funding is because we didn't spend all of last year's budget. It carried forward and finished, or we have to reappropriate, let me put it that way. You'll be amending the budget before the end of this fiscal year to reappropriate some of last year's budget to cover the carryover contracts as well as all these new projects, the carryover contracts that were finished last July, August timeframe, because they are using the current budget authority, but we'll amend the budget to cover these new projects, and there is sufficient funding in the transportation fund to do that. In the water fund, there's also sufficient funding to cover those projects and the drainage as well. There was one other project left off. I need to make you aware of. Okay, that's on the drainage project list. The storm drain within Island View Park, which we are going to cover under drainage utility, we should assume about $70,000, and we'll still be okay with that added to that list. So we're good on the funding. Budget calendar, Jake? This is one Jake wanted to talk about.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk with all of you now, see if we can figure out some dates, how many times you want to meet, when it'll work. I don't want to wait until May, obviously, to have these discussions. I'd prefer if in May is when we have a tentative budget that's pretty close to the final product. We're just kind of waiting on our revenue projections, that sort of thing. So I've met with all but one department director, and they would like to have an opportunity, kind of how we've done in the past, to present their building blocks, their new items, and some of their goals and objectives, some things that are coming in the next 3 to 5 years to let you know. They put all that together. So with that in mind, I'm thinking we need 2 or 3 before we meet in May. I know that's difficult because we got a month and a week before then. And I'm not sure what's already scheduled for special sessions or any work sessions.
I don't think there's any
We don't
set
have any?
for April.
Well, that's
Okay, I'll take all of them.
Main Street,
Not
not till, what's the first one for that?
Steve got all his special meetings in to get everything wrapped up.
He's good.
7 weeks in a row, I tell you.
I'm gonna say, I don't know what I'd do if I were home on a Tuesday.
Yeah, so we could do before city council on the 2nd.
We could do April 2nd.
Just do work meetings on both councils.
April 16th. Yeah, I can probably do the 16th. I've got to be in St. George the next day, 8 in the morning.
You don't have to be awake, do you?
Yeah. Well,
You and Marcus.
yeah, me and Marcus. But he's okay. He's off the hook now. He's all right.
We're
Well, that's
doing that,
quarterly.
we're doing it before,
Oh, he's
not,
doing it quarterly. That's right.
we're doing it before, not after.
But we're gonna make,
Yeah,
we're
so
gonna
we should be okay.
push into May though. We talked about- Go ahead.
Right. Okay, so April 2nd and the 16th. I think we'll be good. We can talk after that, go from there in
If we need
May.
to do something else, we can do something else later in April.
Yeah, yep, that'll work. Thank you. We'll just plan on 5:30 those nights?
Yep,
Sounds
Okay.
all right. That it, Jake?
Yeah, that's it.
Steve, got any
Thank you.
more?
That was painless.
I don't think there's any reason for a closed meeting, so with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn and redo the RDA meeting if you want. What? I'm just kidding.
You are funny.
Motion to adjourn, not to an RDA meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Council's adjourned.
Yeah.